Hey, before we get into today's episode, I want to say something briefly. This show has always been about one thing: navigating divorce in a way that doesn't destroy you or the people you love. That means we talk about real stories, all kinds of them. Today's guest is a man who came out as gay to his wife, and together they built what many people who know them called one of the best divorces they've ever witnessed. If that's new territory for you, I want you to stay with it, because the principles at the heart of this story, honesty, intention, putting your kids first, and refusing to let fear run the show, those are universal. They belong to everyone. So whoever you are and however you got there, you're welcome in this conversation. But before we get started, a quick note. I'm a certified divorce coach, not a therapist, attorney, or financial advisor. Nothing on this podcast is legal, financial, or mental health advice. The conversations we have here are meant to inform, inspire, and give you a starting point, not a finish line. If you're going through a divorce, please work with the appropriate licensed professionals for your specific situation. Now, with that said, let's get into it. So what happens when the most loving thing you can do for your spouse is tell them the truth that changes everything? My guest today sat with that question for years. He was married. He was a dad. He was building a life that looked exactly like it was supposed to look. And underneath all of it, he was carrying something he hadn't said out loud to anyone. When he finally did say it, he didn't blow his family apart. He and his wife made a choice together to do something rare. They dismantled their marriage consciously, intentionally, and with genuine care for each other and their daughter. TJ Shimeld is a life coach, a real estate investor, a magician, and a man who now lives in Spain with his partner, Tyler, chasing a life he spent decades suppressing. His daughter, Opal, has watched her father show what it looks like to live out loud. And his ex-wife, she's considering moving to Spain herself. I'm Justin Milrad, and this is a Conscious Divorce podcast. And this is one of the most human conversations I've ever had on this show. Welcome, TJ.
Thank you, Justin. Happy to be here and share my story.
Happy to have you. TJ, let's start at the beginning. Not the beginning of the divorce, but the beginning of you. Because I think people need to understand what was there before any of this unraveled. Now, when did you first know? Not when you told anyone. When did you know?
Yeah, so that is certainly a time of discovery, of a length of time that so many people question, how come you didn't know when you were younger? How did you miss the signs and all of that? And growing up in a society that I didn't have any of that representation of what gay meant to be in life. And so I just didn't recognize it in myself at all till much later. And there were the subtle clues and the subtle moments throughout life. The moment of my story where it really came to the forefront was we had just begun our family, married my wife Jennifer, and our daughter Opal was just born. We were living in Massachusetts, and we decided that we wanted her to grow up with trees. And, we lived in a city in Massachusetts, Beverly, Mass, and we made a big leap and moved down to North Carolina to start a life. Had a wonderful job that could transfer, good benefits. We ended up getting a house, all of that. And we ended up having the grandparents follow us down. And there was one evening we were driving home from my parents' house, my daughter's grandparents. And we ended up getting sort of forced off the road by a oncoming traffic in our lane. There was a guy passing in a no passing zone. We veered off the road, ended up coming back on. I sort of overcorrected. We got hit by the oncoming traffic, and my head went through the side window as I was the driver. Unfortunately, my wife, child were okay in it, but I shattered the bones in my left hand, broke my clavicle. I had the dust from the airbag in my eye. And I just remember crawling out of the wreckage to the edge of the road, looking up at the stars, what I could see. My glasses were gone and broken. And there were two things I thought of in that moment. Number one is that I could not die I was the sole provider. Wife was a stay-at-home mom. They needed me. And number two, that I never told my wife that I was gay. And that was sort of that turning point that it took, literally almost losing my life, to finally wake up to who I was, authentically speaking.
That's an incredible transformational moment. And I'm sorry you had to go through the accident to get to that place, but I'm glad everyone was safe and fine.
Yeah.
Amen.
I mean, yes, truly, truly. And, in that moment, the most clear communication I could have with my wife that I would be okay is that, I'm an author, speaker, life coach, as you said, and I have my notebooks in the car and of all my ideas of book ideas and things I wanted to do and write and businesses and all of that sort of thing. And all I told Jennifer was, go get my notebooks. And that was my clearest way to let her know that I still had a future, that I was okay. I was going to be okay. It took 6 months to get the movement back in my hand. I was never supposed to move my hand again. 6 months of therapy, 6 hours a day. I worked on that with using magic, manipulation techniques and stuff to help my hand back. And through all of that time, because now the focus, I was out of work. I couldn't work. Fortunately, I had good benefits that pulled us through. But in the back of my mind, there was always that thing, you need to tell her. You need to tell her. And I was still pushing it back, saying, oh, well, once my hand gets better, once the clavicle heals, once I get back to work, once it was always pushing it down the road.
Sure. So let me ask you a question. So, you were married for a period of time, and in the earlier years of your marriage, you knew. How do you hold on to the earlier years of your marriage, the genuine parts of it, as real and true, even knowing what you know now?
Well, Jen was my high school sweetheart. We met in high school doing a play, The Mouse That Roared, and I played Professor Kokins, this kind of wild scientist that created this bomb. And she played my assistant in the play. And we got along great to begin with. We were friends before we started dating. And I really think that is the truth of it all, is that I thought, we made better friends than we did marriage partners. A lot of times people will ask, well, wouldn't it have been better if you just stayed friends? And it's a yes and no, because if we didn't get married, we wouldn't have had our daughter. That I don't regret any of that. I had inklings about being gay before we got married. And when we were in college, and I was studying clinical psychology. And the very first sort of coming to terms with it, in all my wisdom as a psychology student, I knew you can't suppress these things. But I thought, I have a girlfriend. We're going to get married. I'm going to suppress this. I'll take care of it. I'll be the first human being to be successful at doing this. I was one that I know there are people in my situation that discover that they're gay later in life, and that may lead them to cheating on their partner or something like that. That was, to me, never a thought in my mind. That I made a commitment. I married this person. When I finally accepted in myself that, yes, I am gay, I thought, well, that's for another time. That, maybe way in the future, after she passes or something, if I'm still alive and she dies first. But I was committed to our marriage. As we say, for better or for worse.
Yep.
Right? The turning point for me, was the car accident, because I knew I had to be truthful with her, because she's, and it was that kind of brush with death that really brings forth what's important. And in a marriage, honesty is a big piece of that. So I knew I needed to tell her. And I did. What sort of got us to that point was actually with the car accident, and we had benefits, some money coming in, but our insurance said that they weren't going to cover anything. We had the medical bills and the stress and all of that. So it was in the midst of a really big fight that we had never really fought before. That's how well we worked together, that we never really had a big all out fight. I had never raised my voice with her, after all these years to high school and college, and now we're married. I felt in that fight, I was very mad at her. And, in the midst of it all, at that moment, I felt like there was no way I could forgive her. That how do we get past this? How do we get past this? And that's when it came up in me. Is there's something you're keeping that you're not being honest about? This is how you forgive her, by sharing this with her. So we sat down one evening, and I just was very matter of fact of that, this is something that I have come to terms with, that I had been struggling. I didn't really know. I didn't understand, but now I'm accepting in myself that I'm gay. And I said, I don't know what that means for us, for our marriage, but I just thought you should know. Her response, the very first thing she said was, well, she said, when I first met you in high school, she said, I thought you were gay, like you and your best friend. I thought you two were a couple. So it was almost like no surprise to her at all that I was gay. It was more of a surprise that we became girlfriend, boyfriend, and got married and all of that. So it was like she accepted it. And all the stories I had gone through in my mind of, well, what's she going to say? What we're going to do? That this means we have to get divorced. This means this means that. This means she'll hate me. And the reality sometimes is much more interesting than all the stories that we come up with. And her response was being very supportive. She did have questions. Spent, I think it was a whole night discussing this and talking about this, and what it meant. And we did, for a little while, try at her suggestion. She said, well, why don't you try it? We could like have an open marriage, and me being me, had to research this. I had to like, what does this work? What's an open marriage mean? How does that work? So before either of us did anything, and so we researched, we both agreed, well, I thought it only fair if I could go out and see someone, then she could go out and see someone. And so we tried that for a time. Interestingly enough, I got jealous and asked that we close the marriage, but we ended up staying together from the moment I told her till the time we really decided that we needed to change something and split up. It was like almost a 10-year period.
Man.
And during that 10 years, because I thought I was being strong for her, I thought that getting a divorce would hurt our daughter. I thought maybe once she's 18, and I did seek help. I loved your opening there, that I understood I can't do this alone. And I did start seeing a therapist because I felt stuck, because I didn't quite feel I belonged in the gay world. I didn't quite feel like I belonged in the straight world. And so I just felt so alone. And I started speaking with a therapist, who the moment of clarity came when she said to me, her exact words were, do you want your daughter growing up thinking this is what love looks like? And I even get chills saying it now, because it just opened my eyes, because I realized that I'm shrinking myself to appease others, and I'm not living who I authentically am. And that's teaching my daughter that she can't be who she is. She has to get everyone else's approval. I thought I was helping my wife at the time, and realizing that I could never fully love her, that she deserves that full love. I thought it was love between us. Like I said, it was a friendship. It was great. But what I have now with my husband Tyler, that I can show him all of my sides. It's a different sort of feeling than what I had with my wife, and being able to set her free, so to speak. She was able to find the love of her life. And it was such a, I thought I was being so selfless of staying in the marriage for her, for our daughter. And really, I was being selfish because I wasn't allowing her to experience true love. I wasn't allowing my daughter to see what true love looked like. And so that little moment with the therapist changed everything. And that's when we really sat down and decided that, what this is going to look like for separating and getting a divorce.
So here's what strikes me about what you just described, and I want to honor something. That moment wasn't just hard for you, it was hard for her in ways that are different, and honestly, in ways that sometimes get overlooked. So, my next question for you, TJ, is how did you navigate your own grief for the marriage alongside with the relief that you were also probably feeling now that you are outed by yourself and you can live the life that you truly wanted and felt compatible with?
It honestly was difficult because there was a loss, because there's that future I created of us growing old together, of what that looks like, of sitting on the front porch together. And I just remember driving home after we had separated. In the state of North Carolina, the laws are you need to live apart for a year before you file for divorce. And so once that was established, and she had moved out into an apartment, and I remember driving and seeing just this old couple, a man and a woman, taking their garbage out to the curb together. And it just brought tears to my eyes, because I thought, what did I do? That I had a marriage, and now I'm stopping this because I'm gay. I'm never going to have that. I'm never going to grow old with someone. I'm never all of these things. So there was a struggle. I did go through a period of depression after divorce. Thankfully, I had people in my life that could help me with that. I had the therapist, and talking with people really helped support me during that time, because even though it was something I asked for, it was also that loss of that, as I said, that loss of that story that I had in my head for my whole life of what our life would look like. And now all of a sudden there was just this blank screen, and that's the unknown, and that's scary. And taking that step into the unknown with the support, and knowing I had people to talk to, I had friends, I had family that were all very supportive at the time, that I knew it would be okay at the other end. I didn't know how. I didn't know what that would look like, but having people to rely on was tremendous, because trying to do it alone was scary. We're social beings. We need to have people in our lives, like yourself, like a coach, a therapist, lawyers, whatever that looks like, friends, just somebody outside of us to talk to. Because when we get into those stories in our head, that's where life can go down pretty quick.
It can definitely be a scary place in our heads sometimes. Oh, and this is where your story goes from interesting to instructive, because if the two of you didn't just decide to be civil, you decided to be architects of your awakening, your you 2.0.
Yeah.
No lawyers, a custom co-parenting plan, living in separate houses as you were required for your year-long separation in North Carolina. So I wanted to understand a little more about how that worked. Were there any non-negotiables that you both agreed on?
Well, the number one concern was our daughter. And I did not want to hear a lot. The stereotypical divorce is that the wife gets the children and the father gets to see his kids maybe every other weekend, maybe on a holiday here and there. And, that I can't live without my daughter. So that was something, a stipulation in the beginning that we are co parents. We split the time 50-50. We created a schedule that Opal was in school at the time. So she was like third grade ish when we separated. She took it very well. Like it was an exciting time for her because now we decided that it was best because I had the job and benefits and all that I keep the house because if, God forbid, the roof caved in or something, I'd be able to afford to fix it. She has graduated with a certificate in massage therapy and just started a new business and had clients and all of that. So she had the means to support herself. And so we basically sat down with our accounts and everything. We just divided it in half. She already had her car. I already had my car. So we just took that. But our big concern was more of Opal and what that would look like. And we worked out a schedule that basically she was with me 3 days a week. She was with Jen 3 days a week. And on that seventh day, which was the Friday, was her choice day. And she could choose to be with me. She could choose to be with mommy, or my parents were just the next town over. And so she called them Mimi and Bappa. She could choose to be with Mimi and Bappa that day. And we also thought, because we're friends, we will have holidays together. We don't have to have, okay, you get her for Thanksgiving and I get her for Christmas or all of that. We said, we at that time too, right around then, Jen's mother had actually moved to the same town we were living in to retire. And so we ended up spending a lot of time, had Sunday lunch at Mame's house, was Jen's mother. And we would meet there as a family. We'd have our two separate cars and drive up and meet and have lunch there with her every Sunday. The holidays would either be at her mother's house or my parents' house, tended to host Christmas and Thanksgiving. And so we just all continued because we were still a family. And that's what I think a lot of the whole divorce situation and all of that people think like you're, yes, you're splitting up the family, but also just a different lens of viewing the family through and eventually actually expanding the family because then I met Tyler and then he came to these holidays with Jen there. And then Jen met her boyfriend and he was invited to be there too. So it just sort of expanded the family group. And we were so afraid of, and I think a lot of people are afraid of what divorce means for the child. And that's why so many of us want to just suffer through and hold on because we want the child to be okay. And they'll be okay. I mean, Opal just felt twice the amount of love. Now she was so excited that she had two bedrooms. She had mommy's bedroom and daddy's bedroom. And it just built that structure of love still centered around her, that any expenses that came up with Opal, we would split 50-50 if it was hospital visits or, anything for school, anything she needed, we would split all that 50. There was certainly some hurt and difficulty on both sides during this period, but we were determined that, we were still Opal's parents. And that was our number one concern.
I think what's so beautiful about this is you put Opal first and you did this divorce consciously and collaboratively. I love when you and I spoke before this show, Opal Fridays. And, Friday was all about Opal and that was a non-negotiable. And, I talk about this a lot on the show. Many people blow up their families, not because the situation's impossible, but because they can't regulate the moment. Panic, shame, anger, blame. That creates the wreckage. what you two did was refuse to let the worst version of yourselves run the show. So my question to you is, how did you regulate yourselves to make sure that you didn't blow up the show? And even if one thing changed, what sort of advice could you give to the people listening that, make sure you do this, otherwise it may go sideways? And I just want to make one other point. You talk about family. You will always be a family, just the shape of the family changes. And I think that's what's really neat about it. And the research shows that if you handle divorce amicably and positively, and you don't see the kids don't see the parents fighting or arguing over things that may have to be discussed in a back room, but just not in front of the parents, it's as if the parents were never divorced. And therefore, the kids don't have the additional potential issues that may come up when they're collateral damage of what can happen in divorce.
Yeah, and that is the wonderful aspect of doing this is of course is emotions, of course is hurt, of course is shame, the guilt, and all of it, the anger. And this was between me and Jen. This was our negotiation. We would sit down. I had actually sort of typed up a document, separation agreement, and just sat down and said, let's like read this together and go through and discuss it. And there were parts of it that like she immediately came like, why should you get the house? Why can't I get the house? And then when we sat there and just discussed it, and I think that's the being open and honest about it and trying to keep those emotions at bay, because those emotions do come up, of course. And when I explained, like, when I wrote that part that I would keep the house and we would find an apartment for her, is just as I said, that I had the steady job and the steady income. And if something happened, and then she like it like dawned on her and was like, oh yeah, that's true. What would I do? I think the being open and honest and allowing the emotions. And, there is something to be said with parenting of allowing children to see the arguments and the fights and stuff because they see how it's resolved. But there's parts of it at that age that Opal was that, she didn't need to participate in our discussion of which car do you get?
Mhm.
Which bit of silverware do you want to take? And as time went on too, there were certainly things and objects like you mentioned in the opening. Now I'm living in Spain with my husband. And when we were selling off the house and selling off our stuff and getting everything arranged and all of that, Jen was the first one before I like sold anything. Even if it was something I bought that was like in the house, she had first dibs on it. I would go to her and say, hey, do you want the dining room table? That was actually, it was something we had purchased together, the dining room table, and it stayed with the house. But now that the house was getting sold and all of that, it's like all those furnishings, different things. Before I sold it, I gave her the option, do you want it? It's yours if you want it. So it's keeping that really those lines of communication open and trying to keep the rational in it. I think was what really helped. Again, going back to the house thing, is that there was like a logical thinking behind it. I only thought it fair that, what we had in the savings account, that we would just split 50-50. That just makes obvious sense. It was obvious that she keeps the car that she normally drives because that's like her car, even though we both bought it together. So there were just different things of just keeping that, the logic and the rationale kind of behind it. And when the emotions did come up, we discussed it. The original separation agreement did change. There were things in it that she said, well, can I do this or can I do that? And one of our stipulations too in it, that again, keeping Opal in mind, that we would not be talking negative about the other person to her. And that was even a suggestion too from my therapist at the time, is like, you don't that's still the mother of your child. You don't need to talk bad about her around Opal. You don't need to. She sees you who you are, and she sees her who she is, and you don't need to add or subtract to that. And that was kind of, again, one of that centering around the child that was a non-negotiable for us, that we would be supportive of each other and who we are and all of that.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to slow it down a bit and focus on your ex wife's experience because in most divorce narratives, the person who stays gets written out of the story once the headline moment passes. And in stories like this, the straight spouse's experience is often the most overlooked of all. Research on heterosexual spouses in this situation tells us that the most common issues they face are sexual rejection, challenges to their sense of the marriage, concern for their kids, and real crisis identities and beliefs. So processing all of this takes a lot of time and a lot of work. So what would you say this cost her that she might never say out loud, but that she's worked through? And to add on to that, how has your friendship with her evolved since then? Is that something that you actively tend, or did it just happen organically? And then I'm just going to say one other thing. Clearly things are working well because you mentioned to me that she's considering moving to Spain, and that's a remarkable outcome
Yeah.
about who she's becoming and her commitment to your daughter, but also your friendship post divorce.
Yeah. She certainly, I think she had lost because, as we said, she had moved out into an apartment, and she has been in apartments ever since. She never, with her business and all of that, never was able to purchase a house since then. So I think that's one of those things that she sort of lost out on, I guess, from like a financial perspective. With that being said, though, knowing Jen, she loved having a house, of course, because that's like the American dream, right? You have a
Hmm.
house and your 2.5 children and all of that. But it was the maintenance. She hated, uh, like, to mow the lawn, or she, just all that kind of stuff. She's an artist as well, and a painter, so she enjoyed, painting the walls and different stuff and decorating and that sort of thing. But that was one of the things that seemed like a very tangible loss to her in watching kind of her trajectory. And because after we had separated, a few years after, I became a real estate investor, and so I purchased several houses. And in fact, she became one of my long term tenants in one of my houses for a period of time, um, where she needed a place to stay. And we had an availability, and I had a business partner and all of that, um, with the real estate. And so we offered it to her, and, it worked well. Looking at sort of and that says a little bit there too of our friendship that was established. I think, like, that year separation before you have to file for divorce in North Carolina it's an interesting law, because it does give you almost like that trial. It's a trial separation
That
period,
person, sure.
really, that, to see, okay, is this going to work? Is this, the right choice, instead of just diving right in. And, as you said earlier, that so many people, just the dynamics and the anger and the issue, and just want to blow everything up. And, this gives you some space and some time. And during that time, at first it was very difficult. Like I said, we tried an open marriage for a time, and now we're still married, separated. And so when she started dating, and I found those pangs of jealousy. And, it's just interesting how these emotions just are there, because that's my wife.
We're still human.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And so, there were different times where it was difficult when we'd get together for Sunday lunch at her mother's house and being there. And sometimes it was very a difficult moment to be there and smiling and putting on a grin and all of that when I was upset that, she's dating somebody, woe is
Hmm.
me kind of thing. But as time went on, it became that reality. And too, when, I started dating and when I met Tyler, and it was right around the time I met him, it was in within that like same year that she met her person in life. And I saw it for like that first time I was, there was that excitement for her. And to see and unfortunately, they have some great years together. He unfortunately passed away very early in life, a little over a year ago. And to see the love that she had for him, and especially after his passing, and how she keeps his memory alive, and all of that is just so touching. And realizing that I was keeping her from that, in staying married. And so our friendship grew, and now, Opal's 20 years old now. She does have autism, so it's a level of care that she does need. So she'll always need some assistance. Opal is here with me and Tyler in Spain. And, that was something Jen had said, that she said, don't be surprised if I show up on your doorstep one day, that,
Hmm.
that she, you know, sees kind of the life we've made here. We had gone with the car accident and all that. We ended up having to, leading up to the divorce too, we were going through the divorce, and we ended up having to declare bankruptcy because of all the medical bills and all of that craziness. And so we were navigating divorce, bankruptcy, all the emotions of separating and all of that all at once. And she's seeing that just our ability here, to hearing stories of universal health care here, that we pay a monthly fee into it to have a private insurance here. But it's like a fraction of a cost of what it is in the United States. And, Jen just sees kind of the different lifestyle we have here, better food, the sun, it's all of that kind of is very intriguing to her. And when we chat and text and all of that all the time, and she sends me links to, this TikTok video and that thing, so we've really grown closer, oddly enough, through the years. And that was one of the things, as we met in high school. So we grew up in the same area and all of that. And I remember saying to a friend one time that, I could never have that level of intimacy with anybody else, because we have so many things in common from our growing up together. And he said, no, but you will find someone, and it'll be that level of intimacy. Just because you didn't grow up in the same area or all of that, there's still something that can appear. And it has, and it has. And I feel so fortunate to have Tyler in my life. Has helped me with so much, and so supportive, and my businesses and everything else.
You were definitely blessed. And, this process that could have been horrible was managed well. And I think most importantly, you had a partner in her, the mother of your child, who worked with you and put Opal first and accepted you for who you were. So my next question is, now that you're living this authentic relationship with Tyler, you have a real reference point for what joy looks like. So tell me a little bit about that journey. How's it been? Do you feel, like you are truly living your authentic life now?
I really do. And especially when I decided, I've written books and an author and speaker on stage. And I started this journey doing life coaching. And initially I was working with people similar to myself, who were kind of stuck in a 9 to 5 job and wanted to kind of leave that and build a business based on their passion. And like I did with real estate investing, and was able to leave my 9 to 5 job. And I love seeing that one-on-one transformation with people, working one-on-one rather than being on stage. And I give this great motivational speech and everyone applauds. And they buy my books and great, but I don't know if they actually change. And that's where I began. A year later, and one of my mentors in coaching had said to me, you are going to find your niche in the area of your life that you don't want to talk about. And for me, it's exactly our conversation today. Being gay, coming out later in life, all of that was the area of my life that I just didn't like to discuss. And moving out of the United States, coming to Spain, seeing the difference in culture, that we lived in Madrid for about a year and a half, and now we live in the south, in Malaga area. And I remember I had never gone to a pride event in the US. I was scared to go, honestly. And here we went to our first pride event, and it was like the entire city of Madrid came out for it. There was the old grandfather and grandmother sitting there waving the flag, and there was families, straight families with little kids coming out to watch the pride parade, and it just felt so supportive. And here I was able to hold my husband's hand for the
Hmm.
first time and not feel ashamed, not feel like I had to watch. It's just such a natural part of the culture here that people are very accepting of gay couples. And with that, it allowed this authenticity to come out even more so than I thought possible. And then now wanting to realize that talking about my story and coming out later in life, that I can now help me, that
Yeah.
I needed help during those 10 years. It shouldn't take a, almost deadly car accident in 10 years of, of debate in your mind to come out and to live your life authentically. And so, Tyler has been a big help in that process and changing in my focus in my coaching business to help people that are going through that. If it's, discovering that they're gay, or, how do you approach that conversation if you are married? How does that look? And to show that there's hope, that I talked about, that just that blank screen I had, like I just had no vision of what my future was. Never did I think or plan that I was going to live in Spain.
Sure.
Never did I think that I would have a husband. Never did I think that my daughter would be here with me. All of that has been a joyous surprise along the way. And I can't wait to see what the future brings.
Yeah, and while it was a surprise, there was a lot of intention there, and there was a lot of deliberate actions that got you there. And I think that's what's beautiful. Divorce for some people can mean destruction, and in your case, it was about rebuilding. So my next
Yes.
question for you, you mentioned your life coach. So my next question, I think people will really pay a lot of attention to, because it would be tremendous advice for people who are currently still in the closet. So what do you tell the person who's still in the marriage while they're in the closet and terrified of what comes next?
So the biggest advice is to breathe and realize you are okay, that it's okay. I sometimes wish that being gay was a choice, as some
Hmm.
people think. I tried to choose differently, and realizing that, the first step in it all is accepting yourself, and that this is how you were made. This is how you developed. Is what God gave you, and accepting that first, and realizing again the journey of honesty, of first being honest with yourself is number one. Then the second honesty is being honest with your loved ones and having that conversation. I find really it's really boils down to three sentences. A lot of times I suggest that, I did it kind of not necessarily the right way. It was kind of late at night and, both tired and all of that, and open up this big conversation. You want to do it at a time, maybe after dinner, or you go for a walk together. And just saying and being honest that, number one, I have been struggling with something that I want to share with you. Number two, I'm gay. And number three, I don't know what this journey means for me or for us, but I want to be honest with you and explore this together. And then just seeing where it goes from there, because we get so stuck, and I talked about it earlier, in the stories of our heads of, well, what are they going to say? How are they going to react? What's going to happen? This is going to happen. This is going to happen. And we get into this survival mode. And that's why taking a breath, a lot of times taking a short breath in, a longer breath out, and just letting your nervous system know that you're okay, that you will get through this. There are plenty of people who have gone through it, and you don't need to go through it alone. As I said, I was lucky enough to be seeing a therapist at the time when all of this was unfolding. So there are professionals out there, there are life coaches, there are ways of getting a supportive community. I have a Facebook group. I run a private Facebook group called Leaving Her for Him, where we support people along that journey. If it's just starting to come out to yourself, if it's telling the wife, significant other, or if they're on that other side building their second act. And, that's one of the things I love in the group. We're a small group. We just hit 100 people, just got over 100, and seeing that there's people on every step of that journey, and that everybody's journey is different, and that we need to just be that open and honest with ourselves and with our loved ones, and you'll get through it. I promise.
That's great advice. On this show, I talk about a framework I call U 2.0, the idea that divorce, when done with intention, isn't a destruction, it's a redesign. There are three moves. There are three moves in that process. The first is reclaim, taking back ownership of your identity and your future. The second is reboot, rebuilding from a foundation that's actually true. And the third is become, stepping into who you were always meant to be. What you and your ex did is the fullest expression of that framework I've ever heard from a guest on this show. You both reclaimed something, you both rebooted, and you're both, from what it sounds like, in the middle of becoming. That's not a divorce story. That's a liberation story for two people at once. TJ, I'm genuinely grateful you came on and shared this. For anyone listening who's in a similar place, either in the role TJ was in or in the role his wife was in, I hope this conversation gave you something to hold on to. The truth is hard, but the cost of not telling it is higher. If this episode landed for you, please share it with someone who needs it. You don't have to explain why you're sending it, just send it. I've written 2 books that go deeper into the framework we talked about today. U 2.0 Divorce a Better Way Forward and the U 2.0 Workbook. Both are available on Amazon.com. And if you're in the middle of your own divorce and you want to think through it with someone who's been in the room, I offer a free 30-minute consultation. No pitch, no pressure, just strategy. You can find everything at www.reclaimandreboot.me. TJ, before I let you go, for anyone listening who wants to follow your journey or work with you as a coach, where can they find you and how do they connect with you?
Sure. Sure. I'm very active on Facebook. You can find me there. TJ Shimeld is TJSHIMELD. I have my Facebook group there as well, Leaving Her for Him. Also, I have recently started a YouTube channel. So again, you can find me, TJSHIMELD, on YouTube. And there's also the Quantum Magicians movement that is sort of that building of the second act of for gay men who are wanting to become the magicians of their own lives, to build an authentic second act. And that will be available on the web at quantummagicians.com. You can find me there as well.
Outstanding. So please, if you're going through something similar to what we talked about today, please go connect with TJ. And if this episode meant something to you, please take 30 seconds right now. Leave a review, hit subscribe or follow, and share this with one person who needs it. You don't have to write a novel. Even a 5-star tap helps more people find this show. That's how we grow this community. I'm Justin Milrad. This is A Conscious Divorce. Until next time, stay conscious. Thanks, TJ.
Thanks, Justin.